Welcome back to Outside Views, and today we're diving into a political and strategic power play that says everything about post-Brexit Europe. Anglo-French tensions and the future of European defense. The question at the heart of this episode is simple. Will France block Britain from participating in the EU's new 150 billion defense fund unless the UK gives ground on fishing rights? It's a question that reveals not just political posturing, but the fragile reality of Britain's post-Brexit position. What we're seeing now is another example of how that mistake continues to cost Britain, diplomatically, economically, and strategically. But let's set the scene. The European Commission has just unveiled a new initiative, the Security Action for Europe Fund, known as SAFE. 150 billion euros are on the table here. And this is Europe's response to growing insecurity, Donald Trump's threats to walk away from NATO, and Russia's ongoing war against Ukraine. The EU wants to deepen its own defense capacity. It wants to coordinate procurement. It wants to rearm. And it wants to do it through European suppliers. And that's why SAFE includes a Buy European clause. It means EU countries can only spend this money on defense systems from EU-linked suppliers or from Ukraine. And that means the UK, the US and Turkey are excluded, unless they strike special agreements. In the UK, this has triggered immediate outrage. British arms companies, many of which are vital to European defense, are shut out. Even more frustrating for British officials is that Brussels is now linking participation in SAFE to the wider question of a UK-EU defence pact. And behind the scenes, France is making it even more complicated. According to reports, French President Emmanuel Macron is tying access to SAFE to a very different issue: fishing rights. Yeah, that's right, that's what Costa thought would not happen. France wants the UK to back down on post-Brexit fishery disputes in exchange for access to the defence fund. A senior UK government source told The Times, Europe needs Britain's defence industry a bit more than the French need a few extra fish. They called the French behaviour puerile. But now, let's pause here, because this isn't just a squabble over fish. It's a clash of strategic visions. On one side, the UK is positioning itself as an indispensable defence player. It wants access to EU defence cooperation, especially funding. On the other hand, France sees a post-Brexit UK that needs to be held to its commitments and not allowed to cherry-pick benefits. And this clash is unfolding as Prime Minister Keir Starmer tries to reset UK-EU relations. He wants a comprehensive security and defence pact. He wants Britain to play a central role in European security. And frankly, Europe needs some kind of involvement of the UK's military power and of its defence industry, its intelligence service, its nuclear deterrent. I'm quite frank here. But Brexit changed everything, and now the UK is not an EU member. It's not in the EU's legal framework, and so every partnership must be negotiated from scratch. And that's why the EU's current defence fund excludes non-EU countries by default, unless there's a formal agreement. And that's what Starmer is trying to secure. French reluctance is rooted in a familiar principle. You don't get full access unless you play by the rules. And the rules say no sectoral cherry-picking. No defense cooperation without broader political compromise. And that is why fishing rights are back on the table. Because France wants to make a point. President Macron sees Brexit as a British choice with consequences. And he's determined that the UK does not get special treatment without concessions. And for Macron, this isn't about fish. It's about leverage. It's about showing that the EU sticks to its principles, that leaving comes with trade-offs. And yet the timing of the standoff couldn't be worse. Europe is trying to rearm, the US is unpredictable, and Ukraine needs support. And instead of unity, we are watching allies argue. And to be fair, UK officials have downplayed the role. Defense Secretary John Healey and Armed Forces Minister Luke Pollard, Pollard, where have I heard that before, have both insisted that talks are ongoing. They've stressed the importance of working with France. They have pointed to joint UK-French leadership on peace negotiations for Ukraine. And they have argued that France, too, will benefit from deeper UK involvement. But the truth is this: without a formal defence pact, the UK remains on the outside the fund, outside the framework, outside the big decisions. And the SAFE fund is more than money. It's a symbol of Europe's kind of, besides NATO ambitions. It's about strategic autonomy. And if Britain wants a seat at that table, it needs to compromise. And the irony is, before Brexit, Britain was at the heart of European defence. It led missions. It shaped policy. It influenced budgets. And now it's lobbying for access to a table it once helped build. And it may need to give up something, perhaps fishery rights, to get there. And so here's the broader takeaway. Brexit didn't just isolate Britain economically. It isolated the UK strategically. It forced the country to rebuild ties that already existed, to renegotiate access it once took for granted, and to make trade-offs it once avoided. Now even defence, once considered too important for politics, is part of the Brexit reckoning. The possibility of being shut out of Europe's largest ever defence fund is not just a political embarrassment. It's a signal that Britain's role in Europe is diminishing, unless it acts. But what would acting mean? Does the UK have to cave in on fishing rights just to access defence cooperation? Should strategic security be held hostage by coastal access and quotas? Or is this just the price of Brexit, the inevitable consequence of leaving the political structures that once gave the UK influence? There is another layer here. Participation in SAFE is not only about funding access. It's about industrial cooperation, joint procurement, shared research and development. Modern defense systems are rarely built in one country alone. They rely on joint supply chains, shared design authority, technological interoperability. So when the EU says that weapons with design authority outside the EU are excluded, that cuts out a lot of British tech. British firms could find themselves frozen out of major defense projects, and that hurts jobs, it hurts innovation, and it hurts British strategic influence. The concern isn't just hypothetical. German officials have raised serious questions about American control over key systems like the F-33 jet. What happens if Washington pulls the plug? What happens if there's a backdoor control? Even though the US denied a kill switch, the fear is real, and it's driving the EU to double down on strategic autonomy. And for the UK, that's a challenge, because it means Europe is moving on, building without Britain, planning without Britain, and soon arming without Britain. The May summit could change that, but only if the UK is willing to compromise. And France has made its position clear. If Britain wants access, it needs to stop treating EU cooperation as an à la carte menu. And we must remember, fishing was one of the most emotionally charged issues in the Brexit referendum. It's symbolic, it's nationalistic. But in strategic terms, it's a small part of the overall equation. And clinging to it could cost Britain much more. If Britain is serious about playing a role in Europe's defense, it must recognize the world has changed. It must stop pretending it can dictate terms from the outside. And it must be willing to trade outdated symbols for real strategic gain. So will France shut the UK out? Possibly. But it's also a negotiation. And negotiations are about priorities. The question will be, what does Britain prioritize? Fish or influence? That's it for today's episode, and of course let me know what you think in the comments below the video. Should Britain compromise to get into safe? Is France being petty or principled? If you value in-depth analysis beyond the headlines, like this video and subscribe to Outside Views. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time, and one of those next videos is right here in the end screen.